This is where real conversations happen. Welcome to Sit Down Sundays on the Final Boss podcast, where the movers, the creators, the ones really making things shake, pull up, sit down and talk different. No filters, no fluff, just raw stories, real journeys, and the mindset behind success. From influencers to entrepreneurs to visionaries turning ideas into empires, we tap in with the people who don't just talk about it, they live it. This ain't just an interview, this is a seat at the table. So lock in, listen close, and learn how bosses move. Sit Down Sundays, only on the Final Boss podcast. New era, same boss.
Welcome to Sunday night edition of the Final Boss Podcast, episode number 216. 216, man. How's everybody doing? Listen. As you already know, I got a great show for you tonight. And listen, I'm excited to be here. I hope you all are excited to be here as well. Listen, man. It is Sitting Down Sundays. Man, what a time. Man, what a time. Listen, I got my handy dandy magic pointer, wand, whatever you want to call this thing. All right. Hey, Chikandi, how are you? Glad to see you here. And everyone else who's coming on board as we speak. Thank you for being here. You know, man, these are trivial times, right? These are trivial times. But guess what? You must continue. Don't never let up, never give up. You must never give up, right? All those things that are around, that are happening, they're going to happen regardless. You got to live your life, and you have to see it through. Complete task, right? Create plans. Continue working on building your future. Never let up, never give up, right? And by the way, go get Go Time if you haven't. Go get Go Time. All aboard the fired up train, if you can see it. Right? Go get Go Time. All aboard the fired up train. A national bestseller, right? A national bestseller. And you see it. You see it right behind me, right? It's right there. You see it. So, man. I am here. We are here. And guess what? No matter where you're watching from, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, Twitch, Kick, or Spotify. Thank you for joining us, right? Thank you for joining us. We are glad to be here. And you found us just like we found you. Right? So, tonight, like I was saying, tonight's episode. Man, tonight's episode, boy. Let me tell you. We call it tonight's episode BBB, right? You know, you've heard the term. All these different presidents, they come up with this term BBB, triple B, right? But tonight, our triple B is being before you become, right? Being before you become. Episode 216, season 4, the Rebirth. So let's get right into it. Let's get right into it. Let's get rid of these. Boom. All right. Whew. Okay. So, you ever chase something so hard you forgot who was doing the chasing? Have you ever done that? Well, sit with that for a second, right? Because that is not a motivational line. That is a diagnosis, right? And the reason it hits the way it hits, because most of you listening right now, you've been there. Maybe you're there right now, running so fast toward the next level, the next milestone, the next version of your life that somewhere along the way, the person doing the running became a blur, became background noise, became secondary to the destination. And that, my friends, is the most dangerous place a builder such as yourself can operate from. Because you cannot trust the output of a machine when you do not know the condition of the engine. It's time to oil that engine. All right. It's time to check those fluids. Right. Time to check those fluids. So, welcome to Sitting Down, right? Sitting Down Sundays. And tonight, we're not talking about your strategy. We're breaking down your systems. We're auditing your brand, your business, your revenue model, all of it, the entire blueprint. All of the strays are going to stay on the shelf, right? Tonight, we talk about you. Yes, you, the actual you. The you that exists before the title, before the platform, before the accolades, before the audience. The you that was present on the day before anything was ever built. Because that version of you is still running the entire operation, whether you have acknowledged it or not. 3 letters. B, B, B. Being before you become, right? That is the framework. That is the thesis. That is the medicine the community needs right now in this, it's not mid-season, it's part of quarter season, right? In the third arc. So sit down, get some paper and pen, take some notes, get still, get quiet, right? Because this one's going to hit the root, the root of you, right? But before we can hit the root of you, let's crack this thing wide open, right? Let me tell you exactly where we're standing tonight, before the context even matters, before the season even matters, right? The lens through which you receive the content also determines how deep it actually goes, right? This is season 4, as you know, of the Rebirth, right? We named it that. Yeah, the Rebirth. We named it that. Right? And I need you to understand that that was not a marketing decision. That was not a branding decision. It wasn't a branding exercise. The Rebirth is a lens, a structural framework, a posture toward life that every episode this season builds on, right? The central question that runs through every single show every week across all 5 days is that we are willing to let die to reveal the version of you that needs to live, right? That is the rebirth. Now, we came out of season 3, The Reckoning, right? The season was brutal for a lot of people. It came designed to be exactly that. The reckoning does not arrive to make you comfortable. It does not show up with encouragement and validation. It shows up with a mirror, right? A mirror. It holds that mirror right up to your face and it forces you to look back at it and look at what you've actually been, not who you told yourself you were, not the version you posted about, not the narrative you built your audience on. The actual record, the real choices, the private character, the reckoning, stripped all performances down to the raw person, right? And for many of you, that was the hardest season you've even walked through on this platform. It was painful. It was necessary. but it was also complete, right? And now we are here inside the rebirth, where the work changes its nature, right? The reckoning was about seeing clearly. The rebirth is about deciding. It's about deciding. It is about looking at what the mirror showed you and making conscious, deliberate, irreversible decisions about who you are and who you're choosing to be, right? From that point forward, right? Not what you choose to do, not what you choose to build, not what you choose to pursue, who you choose to be, right? That decision is the entire ball game tonight, right? Ahead of us sits season 5, The Harvest, right? Season 5, The Harvest, coming at episode 300. But we would get to that and get to that bridge later on. Right now, we're here inside the rebirth, planting the deepest seed there is, being before you become. Now, let's get into it. Every sit down Sunday starts with what I call the brass tacks, right? A real quote, right? That's measurable from a real mind. Sometimes my mind, right? Not an internet meme, right? Not a soundbite, right? A substantive statement from a serious thinker that locks in. And this entire conversation is based off of it, right? Before we go any further, let me give you tonight's brass tacks. This brass tacks is a little heavy. It's old, but it fits right? And it comes from Jonathan Wolfgang von Goethe, right? A German writer, philosopher, scientist, statesman, right? Born in 1749, one of the most comprehensive and penetrating intellects in the recorded history of Western thought, right? This man did not dabble. He committed. He wrote, right? He wrote Faust, one of the most studied works in all of literary history. He contributed to the scientific understanding of color theory, plant morphology, and geology. He served in government. He lived an extraordinary life, right? When Goethe says something about how human life works, you don't dismiss it, you live it, right? And here's tonight's brass tacks, right? Here is tonight's brass tacks. Before you can do something, you must first be something, right? Before you can do something, you must first be something. I'm going to read it again. Before you can do something, you must first be something. All right? Now, pay attention to the precision of that statement. Goethe did not say before you could get something. He didn't say before you have something. He said before you can do something. Even the action requires the being to precede it, right? The doing is not the starting point. The being is. The being is the starting point, which means that everything this culture has told you about just getting started, just moving, just executing, just grinding, it's actually architecturally backwards, right? Here is the real problem. We live inside a doing culture. Everybody's doing, right? The do more gospel is everywhere. Execute, output, stack, move, grind, produce, right? The entire vocabulary of ambition is built around verbs of action. And that vocabulary is not wrong on its surface. Action is required. Output is real. Execution matters. But all of that is second, right? All of it. Because the quality, the sustainability, and the integrity of what you do is entirely determined by the quality of the being doing it. That's you, right? You can do a lot and still be nothing. That is not a provocative statement. That is a documented face factual fact, right? History is filled, crowded, overflowing with careers of people who produce massive output, built enormous platforms, accumulated extraordinary wealth, and lived entirely hollow, fractured, misaligned, right? Because they got the sequence all wrong. They were doing before they were being. They were producing from an unexamined, unsustainable, unstable, unresolved identity, and the output carried the instability in its DNA, even when the numbers looked great, right? The reckoning showed you the wreckage of doing without being. The rebirth is the invitation to get the sequence right, finally, permanently, right? Goath locked it centuries ago. He locked it in centuries ago, right? And tonight we build the framework, right? So, let me give you the framework clean and clear. No ambiguity, right? No room for interpretation, interpretation drift, right? 3 components, each one load bearing, none of it optional, right? And here it is, right? BBB. BBB, right? BBB. Not build better, whatever that was. Not that. Being before you become. Let's start with being, right? Let's talk about being. Being is your identity at the root level. And I need you to understand what root level means. It does not mean your professional identity. It does not mean your relational identity, right? The spouse, the parent, the child, the friend, right? It does not mean your social identity, the brand, the platform, the follower count, the reputation. Root level means the character that is present even every single day when every single one of those layers is stripped away. Being is who you are when nothing external is confirming it. Being is who you remain when the brand goes quiet, when the audience disappears, when the applause stops completely, when the deal collapses, when the phone stops ringing, right? Being is what shows up in the room when nobody else is in the room. Being is what your child reads in your face when you think they're not paying attention. Being is not and cannot be faked long term. It can't be faked long term, people. Not even by the most disciplined, most sophisticated, most carefully managed pretenders. The mask eventually comes off. The being underneath is what always and will be there, right? It always shows itself. Now, let's talk about the before, right? The before is the sequence, and the sequence is the discipline. And this is specifically where most people break down, not because the lack of intelligence or work ethic or vision, because they refuse to honor the sequence, right? They want the outcome first, and they promise themselves they will figure it out. They will figure it out. The character once they get comfortable, right? They want the relationship first. They want to promise themselves they would do the healing after they receive the love. They want the money first, and they promise themselves they would sort it out and gather their values once the pressure is off. The problem is that the pressure never fully goes off. And the character that was promised later never actually arrives because the conditions for doing the work keeps getting deferred. Before is not non-negotiable. It's not a non-negotiable commitment to the sequence. The sequence of is internal before external. And it's always built like that, right? Now, let's talk about the become, right? Let's talk about the become. Yeah, you stay there. Don't go nowhere. I see you. Stay there, right? The become is the trajectory, not the destination, not the arrival point, not the achievement. The trajectory and this information right here is critical. Becoming is a season of your life, right? Becoming is the permanent condition of a person who has correctly established their being. You do not become and stop. You do not reach a level and get to park your identity before park it permanently, right? Becoming is ongoing expression of stable being, moving through time, moving through growth, moving through challenges, moving through loss, moving through expansion. And here's the rest of it, right? Here's the rest of it. And here's a test. If your becoming is authentic, it is flowing from a genuine, examined, grounded being. It should always be recognizable as you, right? The version of you at year 1 and the version of you at year 20 should share unmistakable DNA, even if the scope has multiplied beyond anything year 1 you could even imagine, right? You strip it all the way down and look at the verdict. If your being is not solid, your becoming will eventually expose it. Not sometimes, not under extreme conditions or circumstances, every single time, right? Now, let us go back to season 3, right? Let's go back to season 3, The Reckoning, right? Just for a moment, because I don't think everyone in this community has fully processed what the reckoning actually did to them. And you need to process it before you can fully inhabit the rebirth. Some of you think you are running around in the rebirth. You aren't. You haven't elevated yet. You're still in the reckoning, right? You're still in the reckoning. It's time to elevate. It's time to upgrade. It's time to improve all those different variables, including your operating system, right? The reckoning forces this very question. Who have you been? Not who do you want to be, not who you are in the process of becoming, not the aspirational version of yourself that you keep in your mind as a target, right? Who have you been, right? Past tense. It's documented, right? What choices did you make when you genuinely believe nobody was watching? What corners did you cut when the pressure mounted and integrity became inconvenient, right? What relationships did you compromise, diminish, or outright sacrifice because the deal on the table was more convenient than the truth in your chest, right? What did you build that looked right from the outside, but you absolutely knew was not built from the right place internally, right? The reckoning is not punishment for those answers. It is inventory. It's honest. It's complete. It's unflinching inventory, right? And inventory is the only useful if you're willing to count everything in the warehouse, not just the products that you're proud of. We're talking about everything, right? We're talking about everything, all of the inventory, right? All of the inventory makes sense. Now, here is what that will cost you. And this is the part that the community needs to sit with longer than it has. So get ready. And if you're not sitting down, sit down. The reckoning costs you the comfort of the false self. You were supposed to shed the false self in the reckoning. About that carefully. The false self was not entirely bad. It had bad systems. It had bad routines. It had a bad framework, right? A bad framework for navigating life, and that had taken years to construct. It had justifications for every compromise and explanations for every inconsistency that were internally coherent, even when they were externally dishonest. The false self had learned to avoid the mirror. Full stop. The mirror. With extraordinary efficiency. And that system, as broken as it is and was familiar, comfortable, and known, right? The reckoning was supposed to burn it down. The reckoning was supposed to burn all that down. And when a false identity burns, even when you know it needed to go, even when you participated in the burning and called it growth, the grief is real. Do not let anyone in this space or any other space tell you the death of false version of yourself is a painless transaction. It's disorienting. It's destabilizing. It can be terrifying because the question that comes after the burning is not just who am I now? The question is who I was ever. Who was I ever, right? And that question, honestly asked, will shake the floor beneath you, right? If you're feeling that level of guilt, you're supposed to. That shaking is not a malfunction. That is the reckoning, doing exactly what it was designed to do. And here's the reversal, right? And this is the point. I need you to carry this point into the rest of this episode, right? Because it's a cost. All of it. The grief, the disorientation, the destabilization, every uncomfortable inch of it. That was the entry fee for what you're standing inside of right now. You did not stumble into the rebirth. You paid for it fully, right? With the most valuable currency there is, your comfort, right? Now receive what that payment purchased. Receive the payment. It's time to get paid. Let's talk about something, right? Let's talk about identity before the title. Identity before the title. This is the core problem, right? And here's a specific. This has a specific pattern, right? And I want to name it tonight because it's running inside this community and it's running inside every ambition, every high performing results that are oriented, looped, and oriented circle, right? That I personally have ever been a part of. Because people build titles before they build identity. And then they spread the remainder of their careers, in many cases, the remainder of their lives, trying to live up to something they were never actually prepared to carry in the first place, right? They carried around weight that shouldn't be theirs, right? They didn't give it identity. Now, let me show you what this looks like in real environments so you can recognize it when you see it, or more importantly, when you become it, right? When you become it. The CEO has a title, the office, the company, the team, the investors, but does not have the examined character to lead from. What happens in that vacuum? The company does not operate without a character. Organizations take on the personality of their leadership. So the company develops a character by default, but not from the CEO's intentional being, but from their unhealed wounds, their unresolved insecurities, their unchecked ego patterns. And what looks like a business problem, the culture issues, the retention crisis, the leadership failures below the top. It's actually an identity problem at the top that has metastasized throughout the organization. That sounds familiar. Shots fired, right? Shots fired, right? We're looking at that every single day you turn the TV on, right? We're living it every day you walk outside this door, your door, right? The entertainer who gets the platform before they solidify their voice. Watch what happens. They produce output. Sometimes prodigious output, right? But here's quality that the audience cannot quite name. Here's a sense that whoever is behind the art is still being constructed while the art is still being released. The audience feels the instability even when they cannot articulate it. And the entertainer spreads years, sometimes decades, trying to figure out why the audience is not fully connecting. When the real answer is that the artist has not yet fully connected with themselves. Right? The man who becomes a husband or a father before he does the foundational work on his own identity, he brings every unresolved wound, every unchallenged assumption, every inherited pattern from his own upbringing directly into the most intimate space of someone else's life. And then he wonders why the relationship keeps producing the same results, same conflicts, right? All in different clothing, right? The costumes change. The dysfunction does not, because being underneath has not changed, right? The being underneath has not changed. Title before identity is among the most costly errors a person can make. Not because the title is bad. The title can be legitimate, earned, deserved. The problem is the gap between what that represents and what the being underneath actually can sustain, right? The rebirth is asking a specific question. Can you name the gap in your own life? Can you name it? Can you identify where your title is, right? What your role is, what your public identity is, what your platform is, right? And running ahead of you in your internal reality, right? That is not a question designed to shame you. Shame produces paralysis. That question is designed to target you because now you know exactly where the construction work begins. You build the identity, the title becomes the natural expression of it, and it has to happen in that order every single time. That is the final boss move. That is the only version that actually holds. And here's the misunderstanding running in this community right now. I need you guys to correct this, right? To my smarts, to my motivators, to my warriors, to the sovereign, right? I need you to correct this. And I'm being direct, right? And look, I'm being direct, right? Some of you heard the rebirth and immediately went into action mode. And I understand why. This audience is built off of doers, high output, forward moving, execution oriented people who hear the word rebirth and translate it automatically into a reset of their operating systems. So you started new habits, new morning routines, new business ventures, new content strategies, new disciplines, new focus areas. You turned the rebirth into the most productive quarter you have had in years, and you called it transformation. A renovation and a rebirth are not the same operation. A renovation keeps the existing structure. It updates the surfaces, new paint, new fixtures, new furniture, new presentation. But the load-bearing walls are exactly where they were. The foundation has not been examined, right? The structural integrity of the whole building has not been tested. It looks different. It functions more efficiently, but it is the same building. And in that building was built on problematic foundation. The renovation has not solved anything. It has just made the problem more expensive to discover later on, right? Later on. A rebirth requires you to go below the surface, below the habits and the routines and the outputs, all the way down to the foundation. And the foundation level, the question is not how do I operate better? The question is who is doing the operating? And is that person someone I have actually chosen to be? Or is it the person whose default construction assembled from the pressure of environments or the expectations of others, right? And the examined inheritance of everything that you absorbed before you was old enough to choose. That is what the rebirth demands, right? Now sit with that. And sitting with that word means everything. It matters. Not doing, but sitting. Sit with it, right? Because the being state is not an action state. Let me say that clearly. Being is not a verb of motion. Being is a verb of presence. And there's a difference. And in culture that has trained you to measure your worth by your output, choosing presence over production is one of the most countercultural, most disciplined, most genuinely difficult things you can commit to. Who are you when you're not building anything? Not when you are resting before the next build. Not when you are in the planning phase of the next project. When you have no projects. When there is no next thing. Right? When there's nothing demanding your attention and energy and your identity. Who is present in that space? Who are you when you're not leading anyone? Not between leadership moments, not in the quiet before the team needs you again, when there's no team, when there is no one looking to you for direction or wisdom or strength. Who shows up then, right? Who are you when nobody is watching, nobody is clapping, and the feed is completely silent? That is the being that this episode is about. That is the identity that has to be sold, examined, grounded, and honestly, knowing who you become. Listen, and becoming has any real foundation. Becoming has any real foundation to stand on, right? Now I hear what some of you are thinking. When do you get back to building? When does the action returns? The answer is never fully left. Right? You are always moving. You are always producing something. But the production that comes out of the examined being is categorically different from the production that comes out of the unexamined one, right? The output looks similar. The sustainability is not. The integrity of what you build from a solid being versus what you build from a performance of being is the difference between a structure that lasts decades and the one that looks impressive right up until the moment it does not. The being work is the work right now. You should be working on you inside the rebirth. Not a detour, not a pit stop, not a season to endure on the way to something more productive. This is the productive season of your life. Full stop. Full stop, people. Full stop. Right? To my smarts, right? This information belongs to you, right? My smarts, who are the researchers, academics, right? System architects, analytical thinkers, the ones who need the empirical foundation under the framework before they fully commit to it. This is for you specifically, and I want you to have the full picture. There's a real science behind being sustainable, right? Sustainable. There's information behind being peer-reviewed, academically serious, right? Academically serious science that confirms not just the existence of this problem, but the mechanisms behind it, right? Neuroscience, Dr. Antonio Damasio spent decades studying the relationship between body, brain, emotion, and consciousness, right? His landmark work established something that the philosophy tradition had initiated, right? For centuries. But science had not had a clear map for it, right? The self is not fixed, static structure that is located in a specific region of the brain. The self is a dynamic, ongoing process. The brain constructs the sense of self continuously in real time, using input from the body's internal state, right? From stored memories, from social context, and relationship cues, right? And anticipatory modeling of what is likely to come. His work proved that who you are is something you are actively participating in, creating at every single moment of your life. Every single moment of your life, right? My smarts. You are not a fixed identity navigating a changing world. You are an ongoing constructive project operating in a changing world. And the question, sorry for the background noise, guys. The question, right? Is whether you are a conscious participant in that construction or whether you have outsourced it to circumstances, environment, social pressure, or default inheritance, right? And an unexamined being is not a stable being. It is a being under construction by forces outside their own awareness and outside of their own control. Developmental psychologist Eric Erikson contributed to the second layer. His 8-stage model of psychosocial development across the lifespan established something essential, right? Identity crises are not pathological events. They're developmental imperatives. The human being is designed architecturally, right? It has experience periods of identity, right? Destabilizations, mechanisms, and growth, right? It also has reorganization at the highest level of complexity and coherence. What does that mean for the community or the community of the smarts? It means this: the discomfort of the rebirth, discomfort of the reckoning, right? The destabilization of walking through the rebirth, the existential unease of not knowing exactly who you are in the moment of transaction or transition. None of that is evidence that something has gone wrong. All of it is the evidence that the development system is functioning exactly as it's designed. You are not broken. You are not failing. You are the most productive biological, psychological state a human being can occupy. The science confirms the framework completely. Being in a constructive project, examine your construction, identify what was built by conscious design versus what was built by default inheritance. Then redesign it with intention. My smarts, BBB is not motivation. It is a philosophy in the soft sense. It is applied. It's neurodevelopmental engineering, right? It's neurodevelopmental, right? Neurodevelopmental. Right? Now, my final bosses, my motivators, my warriors. Listen, this entire episode is for the entire community. And I'm going to give you the full arc tonight, right? The full arc from going from rebirth to harvest, right? The full arc. The complete picture from where you came, right? Through where you are and into where this is all moving, right? You need to see it as one conscious line, not as three separate seasons, right? This was the demolition season, not destruction for its own sake, right? Demolition is in service of rebuilding. The reckoning was the season that stripped the performance layer off of every builder in this community and held up the person underneath it raw, right? Unfiltered, undefined. That was the season of honest accounting, right? The season that cost you the comfort of your most reliable justifications. The reckoning, right, demanded that you look at the record, the actual documented record of your choices, your character, your private self versus your public presentation. And then you had to give yourself an honest verdict, not a favorable verdict, an honest one. That season is complete. The work has been done. What it cost you was real and is real. What it gave you in return is the only thing that makes the next two seasons possible. Season 4, the rebirth, is where we are right now. This is episode 216. This episode, this conversation, right? The rebirth is the construction season. But understand what is being constructed. The product of rebirth is not a new business, not a new brand, not a new body of work, not a new revenue stream. The product of the rebirth is you, a more examined, more grounded, more intentionally designed version of you. The being work that this episode has been unpacking all night, the BBB framework, the identity construction at the root level, that is the primary output of this season. Everything external that gets produced during the rebirth is secondary, good secondary, but secondary nonetheless. Useful secondary, right? But secondary. The rebirth is where you build the being that can actually carry what is coming next, which brings us to season 5, the harvest, right? That's the next season. And that season starts at episode 300. Now, I need you to understand something. I need you to understand something about harvest seasons that the architect, that our culture metaphor makes clear, that our ambition, saturated culture gets consistently backwards. A harvest does not create anything, nothing even, right? The harvest season is not a production season in the originating sense, right? The harvest season is a revolution or a revelation season. It reveals what was planted. It reveals the quality of the soil preparation. It reveals the integrity of the seed selection. It reveals whether the growth season was tended with the right care, the right patience, and the right inputs. The harvest is going to come. That is not contingent. Season 5 begins at episode 300, and the harvest will be operating, right? The only question that matters from where you are standing right now inside the rebirth is that the harvest will find what it will find when it arrives at your field, right? Will it find shallow roots? Shallow roots cannot hold a heavy harvest. That is not a metaphor designed to frighten you. That is an architectural and spiritual fact that applies with equal force to the life of a builder. If you do the being work of the rebirth with honesty and depth and genuine commitment, if you examine the foundation and the rebuild of what needs rebuilding at the root level, if you close the gap between your title and your identity before the harvest arrives, the abundance that comes in season 5 will have a structure capable of receiving it, right? If you renovate instead of rebirth, if you update the surfaces and leave the foundation unexamined, if you rush through the rebirth, creating it as a pit stop between the building seasons, the harvest will still come. The season is coming regardless, but shallow roots under a heavy harvest produce one outcome. The weight of the abundance breaks the structure it was meant to fill. Do not let that be your story. You need to see the full arc, reckoning to rebirth to harvest, demolition to construction to revelation. Each one requires the precious one, the previous one, to have done its full work. The rebirth is doing its work right now. So let it do its work. Let it do its job, right? And here's a challenge. Here's a challenge for you, right? This is the BBB challenge, right? And I'm not sending you out of this episode without something you can put your hands on, right? This is not sitting down. This is hold on. That's not how sitting down Sundays work, right? Or operate. We do not talk about the work and then stop the conversation. We give you a specific, executable, non-ambiguity path from the episode into your actual life. And here's the BBB challenge, right? 3 days, 3 moves, each one builds on the last. And I want this entire community running the sequence starting tomorrow morning, right? Starting tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning is day one, the being inventory, right? I want you to sit down with a pen and paper, right? This is what we do, pen and paper. Pen and paper, right? Not a notes app, not a voice memo. I say this a lot, right? Pen and paper. There is something about the physical act of handwriting that slows the brain down enough to reach below the performance layer and access what is actually there, right? And write out without editing, without self-imaging or self-managing, who you are where nothing external is confirming it. No titles, no roles, no accomplishments, no audience, just character. Write 5 words that describe the core of who you are, who you actually are, right? Right now. Not 5 words you aspire to, not 5 words you would put in a bio, 5 words that are honest. If all 5 words are it should be something you're proud of, hold them, right? If some of them are not, hold those even harder. The uncomfortable words are the most valuable data you would generate this week, right? And then day two, I want you to do an audit. We like to do audits here, right? I want you to do an audit, the gap audit, right? Go back into those same 5 words. Now look what you are publicly building, right? Your brand, your platform, your business, your relationships, your trajectory. Ask yourself with complete honesty, does what I'm becoming in the public space reflect the being I've documented yesterday or on that day one, right? Where's the gap? Where's the external identity running ahead of the internal reality? Where is the title making promises that the character has not yet prepared to back up? Write the gap down. Name it specifically. Vague gaps produce vague action. Specific gaps produce targets, right? And then day 3. Day 3 is the commitment. Did you see where I'm going? Right? You cross-referencing, you point, cross-referencing, you building a chart, right? You see what I'm going? Right? Day 3 is the commitment. Look at the gap you named on day 2. Choose one, not the whole list, one gap, one point of honest misalignment between your being and your becoming. And write down one specific, concrete, time-bound action you are committing to this week to close that gap. And be specific. Not a vision, not an intention, an action with a deadline. Then do something that will stretch most of you, right? Then do something that will stretch most of you out, right? Pause. Say it out loud to someone, a person you trust, a person who is invested enough in your real growth to hold you to it. Let that person be your accountability partner, right? Then come to community with it. Post your day 3 commitment. Tag the Final Boss at the Final Boss _podcast. Use the hashtag BBB challenge, right? I want to see this community doing the being work in public, not performing transformation, but actually doing it. The rebirth does not happen in observation. It happens in execution. It is time for you to move, right? It is time for you to move. Now, here's the verdict, right? Here's the verdict, not the summary. Here's the verdict, right? Everything you are chasing runs on the current of who you are. Weak current, weak delivery, weak people, weak personalities, every time. And all of the hustle in the world, all of the strategy, all of the optimization, all of the execution discipline you could bring to bear, none of it changes the current. The current is the being. The being is the source. Everything else is the river that flows from it. As they say, if you're weak, you're weak. If you're strong, you're strong. If the source is weak, The river runs thin no matter how wide you dig those riverbanks. Not some of what you're chasing, but all of it. All of it. Week. The money, the impact, the legacy, the love you want to give, the love you want to receive, all of it. The respect that is not performed for you genuinely or genuinely felt. The authority that comes from actual character rather than from acquired leverage. The freedom that is real rather than the freedom that is just more comfortable situation or a more comfortable cage. All of it flows from being. And if the being is fractured, unexamined, or assembled from borrowed definitions of success that were never authentically yours, everything downstream of it carries the fracture in its structure. If it's weak, it's weak. If you're weak, you're weak. If you're strong, right? You can work harder. The fracture will remain. You can build bigger. The fracture will remain. You can accumulate more. The fracture will remain. Because the problem is at the source. And no volume of output permanently solves a source problem. You are building more on top of what is already compromised. More weight on a bad foundation does not strengthen the foundation. It accelerates the reckoning that was always coming. The reckoning showed you the fractures. The rebirth placed the tools in your hands. It's time to build. Now, the only variable in your willingness is to pick up tools and use them. Use them at the source. It's time to chisel away the reckoning if you haven't already. Not on the surface, not on the outputs, but at the source, the foundation, the being, right? BBB is not inspiration. It is architecture. It is the load-bearing principle that determines whether what you construct with your life holds the weight of the life you are trying to live, or whether it collapses at the worst possible moment. Usually, it happens exactly when you were the most certain, the most confident, the most publicly committed to its permanence. Do not wait for the collapse to respect the architecture. Build the being first. Let the becoming be the honest expression of it. In that sequence, every single time, without exception, without shortcut, without promise that you will get to the being work later when things slow down. Because things do not slow down. And later never comes. Right? Later never comes. Right? Later has to be chosen. Choose it now. Inside the rebirth, while the season is open and the tools are in your hands. From season 3, the reckoning, through season 4, the rebirth, and into season 5, the harvest. Being first was always the lesson at the center of the entire journey. Everything else was context for the truth. Being first. That is a verdict. And that's the verdict that I'm delivering. Right? Now, that is Sitting Down Sundays, episode 216. BBB. Being before you become. To this community, smarts, final bosses, motivators, warriors, the sovereign. You are the reason this platform exists at the levels it exists. You show up every week. You do not just consume this content. You live it. You bring it. You bring it into actual lives, your actual decisions, and your actual construction projects, and your actual relationships. That is what makes this community different from every other podcast audience in this space. You are not spectators, you are builders. The rebirth season is producing exactly what it was designed to produce. Real people doing real work on real foundations. Stay in it. Do not rush past it. We are live every week at 9 p.m. Thursday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern time, every night, 5 days a week. Every show, every episode, every segment built for this community and no one else. Share this episode tonight with someone who is becoming without being. Do not wait for the right moment. The right moment is tonight, while the content is fresh and the person in your circle who needs to hear it is sitting exactly where they are right now. Get to it. Get it to them. Get at it, right? The Go Time Hardback Edition is available now on Amazon and all major retailers. Everything in tonight's episode, the BBB framework, the identity architecture, the being work, Go Time extends all of it into the full execution system. Get the book, run the frameworks, do the work. The harvest is coming at episode 300. What you plant in the rebirth is what the harvest will find. Plant something worth the wait. Plant something worth the wait. Listen, I am here. We are here. I am the Final Boss Podcast. I am the Final Boss. I'm sorry. This is the Final Boss Podcast. The most important conversation happens when you are fully and finally still enough to hear the truth. Stop moving. Listen. Then go build something that lasts. I'm going to say that again. Stop moving. Take time to listen. Then go build something that lasts. Be first. Become after. That is our show tonight. Thank you for tuning in. This has been episode number 216, BBB. BBB, right? BBB, man. That is the framework. That is the episode. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate each and every last single one of you. And as always, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. So no matter where you're watching from, whether it's on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitch, Kick, Instagram, Spotify, YouTube, StreamYard, right? No matter where you're watching. And if this resonates, don't gatekeep. Don't gatekeep, man. And if it does resonate, let it marinate in your spine, right? And remember this before we go. There's a heavy pain that comes with discipline, but there's an even heavier pain that comes with regret. Be balanced, be equal, and be smart. That is our show. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow night at 9 p.m. for Motivation Monday. You know we're going to be running the Fired Up train tomorrow. So be ready. Motivation Monday tomorrow, episode number 217. And I'm signing off. Y'all have a great one.
Only thing